What is up, everybody? I'm gonna wait a second here to see if this. Okay, it looks like I'm live and live. All right, what's up, everybody? This is Ernesto from the Social Work Mentor, and it is, I believe it's a Tuesday night, 11:11 p.m. And if my daughters were here and younger, they would say make a wish because it's 11:11. So feel free to do so if you feel so inclined. But I am just creating this or doing this live right now because I thought I would come on my time after 11 o'clock tonight to, I figured there wouldn't be too many people on because really this is primarily going to be a test for me. So I got some new equipment for Christmas that I'm trying to set up here and I'm trying to utilize. So that is basically what I'm doing. So just to explain really quickly what I have here, there's a little stand here that has a light and it has a thing that I can use here to stream live on Instagram with my phone, and a thing here that I can use to stream live with my webcam that I use to stream to a few different sites, my Facebook page, my YouTube channel, and things like that. So I'm testing it out. The reason why I'm testing it out is because I am, the end of the year is coming up, and it's been a quite an eventful year for most of us, I would imagine. And I actually, towards the end of this year, I've been away from things for a while, and that is because I unfortunately did test positive for coronavirus right here at the end of the year. So I'm just coming out of that, and I'm just getting well with that, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that in a minute, just my experience with that, and hopefully some things that are helpful to social workers. But so as we come to the end of the year here, I myself have a tradition that I do try to reflect on the past year, what went well, what I could have improved on, and what I hope to improve on or do better or do something new in the coming year. And I'm coming up to that time here pretty soon. And so one of the things that I'm playing with in my mind, and I've been playing with for a little while now, is actually taking a little bit more seriously my series of interviews and videos that I do, and maybe live Q&As or things like that, because I do get questions from people that I think would be helpful to share with others in a video format. So I think that is going to be, like I said, as we finish up this year and I start working on my goals for the new year, I think that may be one of them. So this whole setup here is something that I am trying to do to, again, just test this out tonight and see how this works and see if I'm able to get it to go, and maybe people leave comments or whatever. Then I'll know that this works. Let me see if that stuff is active. So, the thing that I was going to say about coronavirus that is specific to social workers, but really it's for anyone. So, as I mentioned, in maybe like a month ago at this point, my whole family was doing fine. We were, taking all our precautions and then some. I really hadn't left my house in probably a month at least. I hadn't gone anywhere. My children are doing distance learning, so they stay home all the time. My wife does have to occasionally go out. She's in early education, so she does sometimes have to go to some of the education centers that she supervises. But she is super hyper careful with hand sanitizer, masks all the time, constant hand washing, disinfecting. I mean, that's part of the job that she has, but just by nature, that is what she does as well. So we were all super careful. And then one day we were actually going to go cut down our Christmas tree. And my wife started feeling towards the end, we were all in the car all together, no masks, my family, my daughters and my wife and myself. And my wife started feeling a little bit under the weather. So she put on a mask at that time, but by then we had already been in the car most of the day together. But she went to go test the next day and she tested positive. So she went into quarantine, and my daughters and I were in the house taking care of her and staying away from her. And my daughters and I were just unmasked in the house. And I had kind of been feeling symptoms already, but I guess I didn't notice it, or I thought that maybe I just had a headache because I didn't get enough sleep or something. But I started feeling it a little bit more. So I went, and my daughters and I had skipped a part. The day after my wife tested, my daughters and I also tested, and all three of us came back negative. So we thought we were fine. But then that's when I started feeling more symptoms. So we went to go test again, my daughters and I. Meanwhile, my wife was like feeling worse and worse and worse. And so, and she's in quarantine. So my daughters and I went to go test for the second time. They both tested negative, but I tested positive. And so it was at that point that I kind of started feeling a little worse. So I had to quarantine in my separate space. And my wife was already quarantining a few days ahead of me in the timeline in her space. And up until that point, I had been, my daughters and I had all been taking care of her. But then it was up to my daughters to kind of take care of both of us. And when I say take care of, I mean, you need to bring, food or water or check up on them. And my wife actually got to the point where she needed a little bit more intensive care. Luckily, I think she probably could have been hospitalized, but it was right on the brink, and she didn't, we didn't ever end up going to the hospital, but she was in pretty bad shape. And luckily I had some symptoms. I did have fatigue, chills. I didn't get too much cough. I didn't have the breathing issues. I did lose smell. I did lose taste. But mostly my thing was fatigue. But my wife she did have problems breathing and cough and lots of stuff. So at the end of the day, as time went by, my wife luckily started feeling better. I started feeling better, and it was a slow and, difficult for my wife, especially painful, for her, not so much me. I wasn't in as much discomfort as her, but it was a long, arduous process that was difficult for our whole family. And we're fortunate enough to have, the resources or the means to quarantine separately and have, our insurance and access to medical advice and things like that. But one of the things that I thought about during this whole process was those people that don't have, they're sharing a 1-bedroom apartment with a whole bunch of people, or renting out a studio with, 6, 7 people. Where I live, there's a lot of that going on. And I know it's not only where I live. And so it just made me think, number one, how grateful I am and fortunate to have that available to me. But number two, thinking about why we are so challenged with getting rid of this is because a lot of people don't have the resources available to them to do what you actually need to do to, to fight this and get rid of it. And so, that was one thing. And the other thing that I thought about a lot too, that I think maybe more relevant to many of you who are social workers watching this or seeing this or hearing this at some point, is that, as I mentioned, we were super careful. It had probably been a month since I had been to my office, so I really was not exposed. When I went, there was some potential exposure when I was at the office, but a month had gone by. So that may or may not have been the issue. I was careful when I was there, mask, hand sanitizer always, but that was one thing. But other than that, I hadn't left the house other than to drive up at Target to get, things here and there once a week or so. But I was careful. My daughters never left the house, so they were here the whole time. And my wife, as I mentioned, did have to go out for work sometimes, but she's hyper vigilant, I would call it, with her care of the things that she needs to do. And yet, with all of that, seeming to be kind of in our favor, we still ended up contracting this disease. And so my thought or my message to people is that, man, if you are having to go out into the world, whether it's to do visits with clients or to go into the office or whatever it is, or even just a grocery store or whatever, and you think you're being careful, I would say double check that. Double check, your little systems, your processes that you have in place for yourself and yourself and your family, because I thought we were doing everything. You know, everything that we were supposed to be doing according to CDC and our public health department here and all the different guidelines. Like, we were on top of those things and we followed them pretty darn strictly, and yet it wasn't enough. So I would, number one, just say that whatever your processes are in your family, relook at them. It's been a long time since we've been doing this, and maybe at some point, we slipped up. Maybe my wife and maybe I did forget to sanitize my hands one time or something. I don't remember that, but it's possible that, just as human nature, as things become normal or normalized, we can sometimes tend to slack off a little bit on the details, and that could have been the case. So if you are thinking that you're being careful right now and you're doing everything you need to do, just take another look at it, because like I said, my wife and my family were lucky that this didn't get as bad as it could have gotten. It seems like we're out of the woods at this point, but it got dicey. A few nights there got kind of dicey. And if that's something that you can prevent by just double checking or doubling down on whatever you're doing to be safe, then I would highly suggest that, especially now that we're theoretically, potentially, possibly getting, maybe towards an end to this. The future is unknown, so we will have to wait and see on that. But it looks there's at least a little light at the end of the tunnel, maybe. And you would I hated to, have to get this, and my wife get this, and my daughters go through it at the end here, when vaccines were starting to be, put into people. That's when we were coming out at the end of our COVID infection. So if you could prevent that by just taking a relook at whatever you're doing, I would suggest that you do that. So that's kind of has been my experience, and what my family went through, and just a little word of advice to all of you, so that we can all move forward. We can all get past this, hopefully, and continue to return to normal in the way that we, as social workers or therapists or counselors or whatever your role is, that we can get back to practicing, as we used to. Although I think we've learned a lot in the past however many months about how our practice can be transformed and changed a little bit. We've all been forced into the situation, and maybe there's some things that it's not going to look exactly as it did before, but I think there are certainly parts to what we used to do before the pandemic that we would want to get back to. And so I'm looking forward to that. But I also am looking forward to adapting some of what we used to do with some of this new stuff that we were forced into. So the other thing I'll just chat about that I mentioned a few minutes ago, for the coming year, I don't know how many of you, I think there's a way for you to leave a comment or a like or something on this. Again, this is part of what I'm trying to learn here in this practice video that I'm making here. But leave a comment or a video if you do New Year's resolutions or set goals for a new year or anything like that, because that's something that I think is a very important part of what we can all do to improve year after year. And it really, the new year part of it is kind of, I don't know if arbitrary is the right word, but we don't necessarily need to do this at the new year. It's just a time when we do it. And traditionally at this time of year in the winter, people tend to reflect and go get introspective and go inwards and think about themselves. And so this is a good time for it. And so, as I mentioned again, I'm going to put on the table, at least, I'm not committing to it yet because I still have to go through the process that I go through to develop my goals for the coming year. But I think one of the things that I really want to do in the coming year is provide value to people that watch this, that follow my channels or my social media or whatever, in the way of some video, either live videos or Q&A videos or interviews. I think is a big thing that I look forward to. You know, I in my 25 years of doing social work, I've met a lot of different dynamic, interesting people that do the work and have other interests outside of the work that sometimes intertwine with social work, and sometimes it doesn't. The work doesn't mix, but I just find them to be interesting people, and I think that's important, particularly for young social workers and people thinking about becoming social workers. It's important to see kind of the paths and the journeys that a lot of us have taken to get where we are today. And so I'm hoping to, maybe make that one of the things that I do in the new year is set up a series of interviews that I do, or live videos or whatever, that documents and shows some of those experiences so that people can learn from it and hopefully get some value from those things. So anyway, oh, I told you I'm just learning how to do all this stuff. I'm learning the system, and I see there's some people, I think, in my Instagram. Forgive me, I'm still learning. I don't usually do too many lives, so I don't know quite yet I can wave at people, but I don't know how to comment or anything. Social work tech, I'm not sure if that message was from recent or a while ago, but thanks for leaving that. It has been a crazy experience, and I know you've been out in the field long enough to know, how we expose ourselves to, even before the pandemic, just to dangers and things like that. And so yeah, it's crazy this time, but as social workers and as people that work with people, we in some ways have always known the risks of being out in the world and working with people. Certainly not pandemics in most cases, but risk is something that's built into our position. So yes, it has been crazy. And I also see here now, I think this is recent, I do New Year's resolutions, but honestly never follow through. That is really the crux of any New Year's resolution. And so I think that's why I say goals. When I talk about what I do at the end of every year, I used to do New Year's resolution, but I had that same experience that most of us have, whether whether it is health related or time management or whatever. Just setting the resolution by itself it's a step in the right direction. It potentially can be helpful, but it's like anything else. It's like if you create a treatment plan or a case plan for someone that you're working with, you can set the end goal that you hope to achieve. But if you don't have steps put in place, or some processes or some actions that will get you to that goal, then that you're never going to reach what you're hoping to reach with the client. And so I look at it in very much the same way when I set my annual goals, is that yes, I do have an outcome that I want to reach. I do have something that I would like to achieve by the end of the year or quarterly or whatever it may be. But I know that I can't just say I want to do this thing and then magically by the end of the year it's going to happen. So when I do my goal setting process that I'll be getting into in the next few days here, it's really more than just creating the resolution. There's a kind of a process that I go through that allows me to set not just the goal, but also the steps and the sub steps and the timelines and everything I need to do to try to actually achieve those. Thank you, social work tech. I do feel better. So I don't know if I'm completely, well, I think I am completely symptom free. I don't feel any of the things I felt before, but I do feel better. So, and hopefully everyone out there is feeling good right now, because like I said, it's coming to the end. I hope for this, and I don't want anyone to get it now like I did towards the end here. I'm hoping the end. But anyway, back to the goal setting stuff. Yeah, just making resolutions again is one thing, and it's like I said, it's a baby step in the right direction, but goal setting involves more than that, as far as I'm concerned, because like for instance, last year the goals that I created were For instance, there was one that was a specific health related goal. I started off well. I I'm gonna put a little bit of the blame, but it's still not an excuse. But on the pandemic happened, and it really threw me off, and just that's not an excuse, but it's an explanation. So that particular goal, I didn't build into it a scenario where my entire life would change and I would need to adapt the original goal. So I didn't. So that one, I probably need to relook at that as a goal for this coming year. But there's another goal that I set with regards to social work mentor and the things that I had hoped to accomplish in this year that we're in now, that we're finishing up on. And a lot of those things I did accomplish because I did have some steps, some actions that I checked in on monthly. Every month I checked in on my goals and my actions and what my progress was, and those weren't impacted too much by coronavirus or the pandemic. And so for the most part, I achieved a large part of the goal that I set, or a couple of sub goals for social work mentor. And so that's the area that I hope to create more goals in this coming year, when I'm talking about doing interviews and more video stuff and content that is helpful to people in that way. So I think at this point, it's 11:30 where I am. I don't know what time it is where you are, but as I mentioned, I just wanted to share a little bit about my coronavirus experience, talk a little bit about my goals that I'm thinking about for the coming year, and really test out this equipment and this format. And I think I'll probably have to do some follow-up stuff with this because I don't know. It looks like something interesting might have just happened and I missed it because I don't know what I'm doing here. But it looks like someone wanted to go live with me and I didn't know how to do it. So those are the kinds of things that I want to learn about and do in the coming year. And that is going to be part of my goals. So I hope everyone out there is feeling good. If it's late where you are, hope you get a good night's rest. I think I'm going to be wrapping things up here and hitting the sack myself. So thanks everyone for watching any piece of this. Hopefully something here is helpful to you. Reach out to me if you have any comments or questions, or leave them here on this video, however you're able to do it. And I will hopefully talk to you all soon. So now the challenge is to see if I know how to stop this, but I will figure it out. So let's see. I will talk to you all later, and I think I can do this. Oh, let me stop it here too. That would help.